So I was sort of scrambling a bit to get ready for this show. I mean, it's a topic I'm really, really passionate about, but I feel like, as usual, you've done like 18,000 times more research than I have. And I was trying to jot down some notes, and I grabbed this pen, and I was like, ah, damn it, this pen is out of ink. And I swear I just got this pen out the other day. I don't know. So I go to my jar and I grab an even more reliable piece of technology known as the number two pencil.
Yes.
And it's like really actually kind of old quintessential like pencil that I grew up with. It's like not really sharp. The eraser is almost gone, but I'm like, you know what? This is amazing.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about in terms of, I just had this moment of like, I can rely on this piece of technology.
Yeah. Well, that immediately highlights for me, and then you can bring us around to the question. That immediately highlights for me something I was thinking about this week or even just the past couple of days as we've been ruminating on this topic, although we've been talking about this off and on our extensive, which I hope will be published after our death, tweet thread. Sorry, not tweet thread, but a message thread, text thread, is that there is this tendency, I always see error first. There's this error within our society generally that tends to see technology as progressive slash constantly evolving. I mean, I think this is a general error in nomenclature or semantics that people fall into. I've fallen into it myself. We fall into generally, which is to assume that over the progress of time, meaning time continues, that we progress, meaning we improve or we evolve. Progress can also be a devolution. We've seen this time and time again, right? Manifest destiny is something we've talked about in a bunch of different pods here, where there's progress, right? There's time, there's organization, there's all these things brought to bear in a colonial impulse, let's say, that wipes out what at the very least should have been integrated into whatever cohesive like new system of A plus B. And likewise, I've constantly thought of that every time I have to reach for a pencil, because I've had that same experience. I'm assuming most people listening have had it. And I can feel the weight of history upon me. I never grab a pencil and just go, oh, I'll try the pencil. I'm always like, look at this. Inside my head is just like, look at this, back to the pencil. The pencil's better, more reliable is the key here, is the more reliable, more essential tool than, say, an iPad. Although obviously the fast processing capabilities of technology are continually expanding before us, but fast processing doesn't mean better, doesn't mean doesn't mean wiser. Progress, time spent doesn't mean progress. I think and it may even relate to, I'm just going to throw all the things out there and we'll see if we'll pick up any of these, throw all the strings, colorful strings. This may relate to people's incomprehension or miscomprehension of like evolutionary theory, which is just like, oh, everything's constantly evolving. You're like, that's no, literally various and sundry creatures are, well, that's really loud. Things are evolving or creatures are evolving. Meanwhile, other creatures are failing to adapt, and then they flipping die off. So we have this as humans, we're kind of the top of the evolutionary food chain. And so we feel like everything we're doing is just constantly improving us. When you're like, no, we're also constantly adding maladaptive elements to us as human beings, potentially to the point where, like, I don't know how far away we are from that, like Wall-E, rendering ourselves somewhat useless, or, as we may touch on with AI in this episode, potentially making ourselves obsolete.
Well, two quick riffs on the pencil, and I'll speak to that last point. I'm reminded as I'm talking about the pencil that even became a kind of elitist thing, or maybe even supremacy when I was a kid, because my dad was a college professor, and I remember he had these Black Warrior pencils.
Ooh.
And they were cool. They were like black and I don't know. I don't know if they were higher quality. Is like they're really different quality in graphite. I don't know. I guess maybe, but it just felt like, oh, look at this cool thing. You know, I'm
Yeah.
using the same pencil the college kids use.
Yes. Oh,
And
totally.
then later I really got into like mechanical pencils. Like
Hmm.
I was just all about it, you know. So it's just fascinating to even think back and some of the themes we talk about in terms of, you know, supremacy or to your, yeah, just to your point, evolution. I wish the humans would evolve more quickly, but I'm with you. I think we're stuck in some ways. I think maybe that's part of the illusion with technology. I think in some ways our technology is it seems like uh, maybe leaving aside actual like cyborg stuff, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
cybernetic implants or whatever. It kind of gives us the illusion that we're evolving, maybe just because things are like moving faster, and we, you know, I think we'll talk
Yes.
certainly about some of the benefits of technology, even like
Yes.
right now, like what we're doing, like we're using some
Yeah.
amazing technology.
Absolutely.
Um,
And the pencil.
and
What a beneficial technology.
how amazing is that? Um, but so one of the other ways technology is bringing me a lot of joy right now is I'm actually getting back into computer games. I
Oh,
gamed a
fun.
decent amount when I was a kid, and my brother and I have an older brother. We would play. He's we could dig into this sort of how this works, you know, psychologically, but the bottom line is he's the one who likes to figure out the game. Like we get a new board game, he's going to read the manual, he's going to figure it out, and then he's going to like basically teach everybody else how to do it. So that's a pattern that brings me a lot of comfort to, like, you know, play a game with my older brother and, you know, have him kind of
Yeah.
explain things to me. So there's this game called Stellaris, which is like a galaxy conquest game. It's very complex, and there's a lot of like world building, and, you know, there's a lot of strategic components to it, some military pieces and all that rest. Um, it's I feel like a lot like a game we played growing up called Civilization, and it's funny, the I think it was the first time we played this game when he was teaching it to me. You can choose all these different alien races, and you can choose to be humans if you want, basically. But then I chose this robot race that the whole story, it's very good at telling a story, and the whole story of
Yeah.
this particular robot race is that this is the evolution of like the AI we are creating right now. So the
Hmm.
story in this game was I'm playing this robot race that essentially evolved out of humanity and
Yeah.
eventually became sentient, which is pretty much the theme of all my favorite sci-fi. It's like robot, you know, consciousness in general, and what does it
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and then sort of synthetic consciousness, whatever. Um, but then, so in this case, oh, this robot race emerges, and then it actually is very benevolent. It
Mm.
realizes that it like takes pity on humans in a way. This race is like, oh my God, we
Yeah.
realize that the only way humans can actually thrive and get along is for us to take care of every single one of their needs. And
Yeah.
because that's how they evolved, right? Like, and we're already doing that. We're already automating all this stuff. So it's a
Yeah.
very, to me, a very feasible idea of where all of this could go.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's very, very, very far from the worst case scenario. I'm like, that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, it's a Wall-E kind of thing where the
Yeah.
everything's taken care of, and hopefully we're
Yeah.
not just, you know, hopefully that we end up being a little more healthy than we're portrayed in the Wall-E scenario. um,
Yeah.
but, you know, given everything I've studied about just human psychology and socialization and just how even when I feel like I've talked about this, you know, I've been hunting for like the perfect revolution, which is just a total like fallacy, and it's very lazy, right? To just and sort of projecting onto everybody else like, oh, you should be perfect or whatever. Um, and so I don't know, I've kind of grown out of that. But this idea that, oh, over here, you know, it's like the activists have the right answer, and the consciousness people like understand how we should relate emotionally. And it's like,
Hmm.
you know, there are pieces of truth in all of that, but nobody has cornered the market on, you know, how we should behave and how we should interact and all of that. And I think that's a lot of the theme we have here. So yeah, I just thought that was it was just really fascinating. And in that game, the it's literally named as a pet race.
Mm.
So
Oh,
you're
yeah.
playing I'm playing the robots, and then I have to take care of the humans as
Yeah.
basically like a pet. And it's, you know, it all makes sense. It's actually totally plausible. That's where they
Yeah.
could be going.
Well, especially, I don't know when this game was created, but it seems very cogently connected to now slash the past 10, 15 years, especially, where I had never heard the term until the past maybe 10 to 15 years, cat mom, dog mom, that whole premise of like, I think it's I think it's horrifying, by the way. I'd be happy to talk to anybody who considers them a cat mom or a dog mom or a dog dad or a cat dad. I think it's horrifying. But it speaks to that same premise. Also, we are prevalently in the sort of generational miasma of the era of the helicopter parent. I think especially as relates to obviously we are of whatever, we're like a elder, what is it, geriatric millennial slash super late Gen X. We got,
we're zennials. We're zennials. We're
zennials. Oh yeah, we got our own category. But we didn't grow up with helicopter. I mean, I grew up with super strict parents or whatever, but they weren't helicopter at all. Like I spent, I don't know, as
we
a
were
kid.
like latchkey kids, right?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, my mom was home all the time, so I was never latchkey style, but like but I was never home. Like as a kid, like when I was a 7 or 8-year-old, I was out of the house, man, for like 4 to 6 hours a day, just like out in the neighborhood or in the trailer park or in the woods or whatever, or reading a book. Just like I wasn't around people and people weren't. Now, listen, I was well taken care of, especially being a parent now. I was like, certainly. But generationally, it's fascinating to see that that's how people tuned the robots in the narrative. A, because it's tenable, but B, because it's also something that we gravitate towards as like, I don't know, like goods, like caretaking, the good way of caretaking within our present society, you know. And it also comes from because this will come up too. It comes from a left, I would say a left bias. I've been looking at media bias a lot the past couple of years because as I've talked about in the show, I ignored the news for most of my life, and then since all of a sudden the news became very pressing, where I was told not to leave my house and I couldn't work anymore, I was like, hold on, what's going on out there? And I noticed how aggressively biased, I'm going to go ahead and say statistically all news is. So and so I've started noticing like cool patterns of like what are left, and I'm a registered independent, and I know some people are like eye roll about that, but whatever. That there are left and right biases tribally of like, oh, people tend towards this psycholization, and that manifestation of robot is also very left biased. That's a very left biased interpretation. Because again, that's generally how, at least politically, how it's been playing out, is that like essentially a patriarch or the state will take care of you. Like that's kind of the state's job, is to sort of be a daddy. And I've talked about this with the Yellowstone succession thing. And I was like, I really see this popping up in society all over the place. It's just like, we need to constantly develop to where we are taken care of by other people, by the systems we create, by AI, by robots, by whatever. It's this desire to be taken care of. And I think part of that is fostered by, sure, that socialist impulse or like the joys of authoritarianism and the negative, but it's also just it's a response from a high anxiety society where we're like, of course, we're just like, mommy, daddy, like things are messed up. And I think because of the internet, especially, we like know it more and more. We see evidence of it constantly. It's constantly available at our fingertips. And so like, no wonder we want to be taken care of, you know. Yeah. It's just, and then of course the fun idea of like voting or blah blah, like, which I think is a semi fallacy, or the same thing with like technology creation, is it's like this is the weird thing, we get to choose our parents essentially. And again, this is right. I'm always trying to tie everything back to like the dominance of new age thinking in the American ideology as having replaced sort of like Judeo-Christian thought, I think probably before I was born. It's that concept of like, I know, and because I know people in my life who are like, yeah, you choose your parents before you're born, like from the cosmic ether or whatever. And so I think in many ways, I think since that's the prevalent ethos, I just wish people would talk about it, because they don't, so then we can't really confront it directly. So whatever. But whereas we can with the Christian thing, you can be like, oh, this is, yeah, but they did this. And when they did this, that was bad because they did other, you know what I mean? We can track the trajectory better. But it's that, I think we're trying to create that same scenario now with technology. It's like, I'm going to choose who takes care of me. Who's my mommy? Who's my robot mommy?
Yeah, you named it. I was thinking it. I hang out with lots of people who believe that the soul chooses the journey, chooses the parents, chooses the path, which is certainly a nod for the pro-life argument, I think. But
No, you chose someone
hey,
who's going to murder you. Yeah.
somebody chose it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pro-choice argument. Okay, cool. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I love bouncing around.
there's somebody I so admire, Peter Block. Uh, People can look him up. But I've heard him say this before, but I was on a call, or like a whatever, a call, a Zoom thing with him the other day, and I heard him say this again, and he was, I think it was like a mentor of his that said this, but he's like, "Don't argue with me because I'm gonna take your side."
Yes.
And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's it right there."
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a lot of what you and I attempt to do. A couple of quick things. You mentioned helicopter parents the other day, whatever, the other month, I don't know. I was hanging out with somebody really wealthy, and there was this anecdote. Oh yeah, we heard about helicopter parenting, and then our reaction was, oh yeah, well we have a helicopter. Is that bad? I'm like, that's not what we're talking about. But it does relate to, but it does bring it back to technology. So
yes, it
that's
totally does. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then I'm just kind of early in my journey, actually, of learning about attachment theory, finally getting around to reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And so yeah, that's all entangled with that, I think, like attachment theory, and why do we grip, and it's just, yeah, I think it's worth us, like, and everybody continuing to talk about, because I feel like the liberal, like, uh motto or something is about freedom, uh and that's certainly what I think why I've leaned out in that direction a lot. And I mean, I hear what you're saying, where when you look at a lot of the details of how that plays out, there's a lot of attachment to um a patriarchal kind of control mechanism,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. I mean,
somebody to take care of us. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I think traditionally, I don't know if I always recognized this when I was more like, I think enmeshed in like specifically democratic thought, but generally, like looking at how just people break down political parties, like the right, I think even better than Republican, Democrat, I think the right is associated with small government. So like literally, and the left
Right.
is associated with big, just in that sense. So then you're literally setting up technology. Well, I don't want to get, but I'm going to put quotations around that kind of technology so we can keep the conversation focused, because systems or organizational principles or framework designs could technically be described as like technology, organizational technology. But I'm putting a quote around that on purpose, because we are talking about technology. But like the idea is to create systems that sustain, foster, progress, evolve, that sort of sense, like in the left or
Right.
whatever. Word.
Yeah, and I think, particularly specifically relating it to how this all began, with some of the things that, with people who would, I think, label themselves probably as progressive, or if not activists or anarchists, are the same
Yeah.
ones being like, we need this vaccine, we need these masks, we need to do these protocols handed down by who?
The state.
So we won't,
very much so, the government. Yeah.
We won't unpack all of that. Go back and listen to those episodes.
No, but it's part of what I think it's what technology is for, though. I mean, like, or technology that we cling to. Go back to the right. It's about fostering. That's the idea. Is fostering better existence, right? Fostering, like, here's a thing that we can use to then make life better. So then why?
Yeah. Well, one one funny example of that is the squatty potty. So
Yeah.
And this has come up because somebody I work with just got one, and I remember, I love the commercial. I never had one. But for those who don't know, it's the idea that, we are biologically designed to squat when we poop.
Yeah.
And the toilet, I think, is this really interesting example of a technology that seemed great, right? It seemed like,
amazing.
wow, we can just sit here and be so lazy when we poop, or for some of us pee perhaps. And and it turns out that that's really, really bad for our intestines. And go look up
Yeah.
Squatty Potty if you want to learn more about that. Could we get a sponsorship with Squatty Potty?
Yeah, I know. I got a bamboo one in both my bathrooms, so I'm on it.
Oh, you're on it. Yeah. That's amazing. But it's just, I think it's a brilliant example. And I think it's funny, even in my team, we do DEI work, and I was like correlating, and I was saying, I think a lot of the challenges we face are because we're looking for simple answers. We're lazy about our thought, and we're lazy about, and this is, I'm pointing a lot at me. This is why I'm here with you, because I think this is always challenging me to, like, go deeper and read more references and look at more sources and all of that. And even just sharpen my sword, so to speak, with you, in what I think. So I don't know. I don't think it's a huge leap to say that, oh, we have this tendency to want to use technology to, yeah, I agree with you, make life better, but sometimes
Yeah.
better feels like easier. And then we realize,
Yes.
oh, easier wasn't actually better in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. Easier is very dangerous. Yeah. Easier is not good for our brains much at all. But again, this is always the thinking under the thinking. I think another heavy influence is the whole concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Even if people don't know that triangle, but and I know it's a simplification of his thing, but it basically says you have to take care of your sort of quote unquote practical needs, meaning like food, shelter, safety, etc., and then you can pursue high order goals. I think technology, as in our sort of modern concept of it, tends to be like, how do we take care of the bottom of the pyramid? So then we can self-actualize, pursue purpose, creative output, all this sort of stuff. Now, generally, of course, I've said this before, but every time I mention it, I think I don't know if it's Maslow's actual, I haven't read his theory. I've just read his triangle. So, but I think the triangle is exactly upside down. Like it's really good. It's a good assemblage of relevance, but it's completely upside down. I think purpose is far more important than being fed. I think expression is far more important than shelter, safety, etc. And I draw on that from, whatever teleological principles, as well as just my innate intuitive understanding of existence, as well as obviously being a Christian. But, whatever, like, you look at the teleology and the concentration camps, and like the people who died were the people who didn't have purpose. So purpose is way more important than food. I've often said this, that like, people are like, you blame people for stealing, or I pretty much got swindled. Shout out to Swindler. I got swindled pretty much yesterday at Chipotle.
Lucky them.
I know. I got swindled giving some people they asked for money. I gave them food. It cost me twice as much as the money I asked for. And then they were also, more people came and sat down and ate the food. Two of the parents were quite, I would say, almost approaching, certainly obese. So I was like, they're doing quite well. They eventually got in the car and drove away, that kind of thing, which I think happens quite a bit, but whatever. I'd rather be a victim than a victim.
A victim of giving.
Yeah, a victim of giving. Yeah,
I can hear that.
Then a victimizer. And I totally lost my train of thought as I got wrapped up in my umbrage.
I think I can bring us back.
Yeah.
Somehow this is all going to segue into a more specific conversation about digital technology, internet technology, and some of the things that are emerging there. One framing I want to offer that I don't think I talk too much about on this podcast is that I saw a vision in a dream in 2007 of the future of the internet, and it was very different. It wasn't these like long, endless cascades of comments where people aren't really meeting or talking to each other. I think in most comment chains, people are just basically showing up with a confirmation bias, and not really reading the whole thing, not really connecting. They don't really know any of the other people. They drop in a thing. I don't know. You've described some longer back and forths, which is probably more constructive. Like that's at least you're engaging over a longer period of time, with somebody on the internet. But for the most part, I think that's just wildly dysfunctional. And this was even back in 2007, which was a fascinating year. That's the year, Twitter either came out or kind of went. I think it had technically been out for a while, but it went big that year. Foursquare, Facebook went beyond college campuses. The iPhone came out. I mean, it was a big freaking year for like digital technology. And for me, I saw this dream, and it was all about small group dialogues. Like, how can we use the internet to organize, like virtual dialogue spaces? And then eventually, like a lot of years later, 12 years later, that would become my startup Feel Real. And then now I'm involved with another startup translator that is really merging technology in a very, very cool way with dialogue practices. So I want to offer that framing. Like that's so much of my journey.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I describe Feel Real is like, you know, we did a lot of things, especially during the pandemic, because we were like already all about, you know, virtual dialogue spaces. We hosted like 300 dialogues. We're proud of that. I mean, a lot of it was oriented around, you know, racial injustice and topics like that. But we're actually right now kind of like in a soul searching period and sort of reorganizing the team. But you know, one of the folks on the team is super passionate because she's driven by her child having been in Montessori and then moving now to a public school in Chicago, well, actually technically in Oak Park, suburb of Chicago, and you know, her being kind of shocked by the iPad usage, and just it's really like it motivated her to look at this more specifically. And you know, I tend to go really wide but not always deep, and so she had I told her about the Center for Humane Technology, I think started by Tristan Harris, who was the main person behind The Social Dilemma. You know, really, and he used to work at Facebook, right? And so he's really looking at like, how is Facebook designed? You know, and one of my co-founders at Feel Real coined this term, algorithms of outrage, which I like that term. I think it's pretty accurate. And so I think we can dig in a little more there, perhaps, because one of the things I like is that the Center for Humane Technology created a ledger of harms, which I know I just sent it to you pretty recently, but I like the way this is organized because it actually categorizes things as like peer reviewed or journalism or you know, and I think you said one of the links was broken maybe, but you know, theoretically this is a pretty cool way to organize research, I think. And the research is not good. You know, it would be my short synopsis of sort of what it points to as the impact. And I'll just look through some of the categories. You know, they break it down into like the next generations, like what is the impact on developmental delays, suicide, etc., making sense of the world, attention and cognition, physical and mental health, social relationships, politics and elections, systemic oppression, and do unto others. So I was digging into a couple of these categories, and one that we talk about a lot, I think, certainly going back to how this began with talking about the pandemic and our kind of social and political and I don't know, systemic reaction to that, is about let's see, let me find it. Yeah, so this was fascinating. This is actually under attention and cognition. So our memory systems automatically prioritize superficial social text over more complex forms of text. For example, after reading news online, people are significantly better at remembering other readers' comments rather than sentences from the article itself or even its headline. This is in part due to the social, parentheses, gossipy nature of posted comments. Similarly, users remember Facebook posts significantly better than sentences from a book or even human faces, on the same scale as the memory difference between amnesiacs and non-amnesiacs.
Whoa,
so I want to
huge.
So that one's huge. Let's tag that, and then I also want to drop in the spread of true and false news online, and this study that lies, and I'm looking at an article they reference actually in Science, I guess Science magazine, which I know you've cited before, at least as a source, although shouldn't trust the source over the specific study, but anyway, so this one I'll summarize this. You know, the bottom line on this one was, let me find it. Here it is. You know, first of all, I kind of appreciate that it seems like we're even like avoiding calling it fake news. So fake news to me sort of was the thing that, you know, Trump Trump like defined that in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I think here they're calling it true and false news, right? So
Yeah.
and this was interesting, right? Given the time period I just mentioned about like my own journey. So this study looked at tweets, right, on Twitter, rumor cascades, as they're called, from 2006 to 2017. And about 126,000 rumors were spread by 3 million people. False news reached more people than the truth. And falsehood also diffused faster than the truth. Now, this is fascinating. The degree of novelty and the emotional reactions of recipients may be responsible for the differences observed.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Now that I think there was one of those studies they referenced. That was one I couldn't get to, because of course, whenever someone says true and false stories, I'm like, okay, well, wait. What my immediate question? I'm like, whoa, what are the metric? I can't even focus on the general content. This is how my brain works. I'm like, okay, well, wait, what did you use as true and false stories? Did you create false stories and share true stories, or did you identify stories that were actually true and label them as false in terms of, you know what I mean? This is why I always have to get granular with the data.
So here's what they say. We classified news as true or false using information from 6 independent fact-checking organizations that exhibited 95 to 98% agreement on the classification.
Okay, so that's low. I would call that like low, what is it? Low confidence results. Only because every fact check I've ever read has been inaccurate, at least in part, like demonstrably so, and biased, significantly biased. So yeah, I mean, fact checks are essentially, this is interesting. So, and this is one of the fascinating sourcing things in terms of, this is just, I know this is a sidetrack, but this is I just hope that this is helpful for people's brains. So like the thing I liked about what you sent me, I thought that was such a smart way of organizing things, also being like, hey, this is journalism, this is peer-reviewed science, right? So then you can refer to that study as peer-reviewed science, right? Because it was published as such. However, the metrics they use are fact check sites, which is, I would even say, on the bottom end of journalism, meaning fact checks are technically opinion pieces. This was the Facebook fact check specifically. This was talked about, this is established in court of law, whatever, for whatever's that's worth, of course, that all the Facebook fact checks were technically, legally opinion pieces. So that then is basing its entire identity of what true and false is on, in some ways, like the lowest form of not the lowest form, but like the least objective form of journalism, even though it's called a quote unquote fact check. Now, that means that's essentially an essential, that would be a consensus of journalistic opinion, ostensibly. For that. Anyway, I just want people to know that as like a quick, like whenever I read studies or whatever, like that's the first question I ask when someone says true or false. I was like, who says? So that would then say, and especially the order of magnitude of how fast things progress. We have no idea whether they're just based on that metric. I haven't looked at the study. Maybe they're actually talking about true and false things, but that immediately makes you go, well, wait, their entire metric of true and false could be literally upside down. Could be completely wrong. You know what I mean? I was just reading.
Why?
Go ahead.
Why are you making everything so hard?
I don't just use true. I've read other studies. I didn't know. I've read other studies on this phenomenon, and people literally, for some studies, they put out like definably false stories. They would take a story and they would add like a false element and then watch it. So that this, I absolutely believe the findings generally are accurate. I think it has as much to do with dopamine as anything, because the ones that are more I think the things that move are more emotional, sensational, and this outrage machine. I know a lot of people disagree with me. I'm sure they have a good reason for it. A lot of people tend to describe anger or outrage as like a quote unquote negative or sort of deleterious emotion. I think it feels great. I think it's literally just good feeling. I think our body mostly receives it as like, I feel alive and wonderful. Not everyone, but that's certainly how I receive anger. Is one of the best feelings. It's great because it's activating and it makes you feel alive and it makes you feel useful and it makes you feel like, especially as a man, maybe this is why men are prone to displays of anger in the way that they are. It's also like purpose driven. Like my purpose as a larger figure in the community larger than women or children, is to seek out danger and destroy it. If a lion comes in, I'm not allowed, really, like socially, and I think this is acceptable, I'm not allowed to stay indoors. I'm one of the people who has to pick up a spear and go and try to, I don't want to kill the lion. I actually would rather make friends with it. And hopefully it talks like Aslan. But I'm supposed to drive the lion out. So I think that's fascinating. There's a gossipy element, certainly, but there's actually speaking of technology, it actually taps into the sort of ingrained or created technology in us, whatever God's AI run amok.
Yeah, well, I'm going to certainly be looking through more of these studies. There's I don't even know, dozens of different references on here, different studies.
It's a great.
I just clicked on
awesome.
one that is actually from like 2014. So some of these are kind of old, but it looks like a peer-reviewed meta-analysis on the relationship between peer victimization, cyberbullying, and suicide in children. So perhaps as we both have more time to go through this, we can talk about it more in future episodes.
Just for anyone listening, it's a great resource.
Cool. So what you just said, though, takes me back to the first one, right? Around like the spread of false news that I was citing in that last part, right? The degree of novelty and the emotional reactions of recipients may be responsible for the differences observed. I think you were just agreeing with that. And I also absolutely agree with that in terms of just how our emotions mingle with our interactions online, because we have to like fill in a lot of emotional information. Like we're basically imagining what is happening on the other side of that text. We're so far removed from the person who sent it. Even maybe it's even worse, right? If we see a picture of them, then we're like sort of filling in all of these projections based on just like a probably crappy little profile image. So I think we agree with that, and you like weave in feeling right or righteousness, which I maybe blend those in a way that you don't, but that idea of being right, I think, mixes there too. And that I know I cited the book Hospicing Modernity, where it's like one of the first times I'd actually heard somebody even attempt to correlate the different brain chemicals, the different pleasure chemicals such as dopamine, with ideas of like being right or feeling right, or defending ourselves or feeling powerful, whatever we're defending, like it's just like like dopamine is neutral, right, in the sense that it's just
here's your drug.
It doesn't matter how right that is in like an actual referenced or verifiable way.
No, well, it's funny too, because all these, I mean, even these sorts of findings about what technology is doing is enhancing or focusing itself on the elements that I think a lot of us expect or hope technology will improve upon. That if we're able to connect with people around the world, then shouldn't that open up our understanding and make us more empathic and more inclusive? As we develop AI, shouldn't AI then, if we can take the sort of emotional element out of it and we can do a version of, almost like put a version of ourselves out there without emotion, then shouldn't that at least be able to process information so much more objectively, cleanly, etc.? There's I think a lot of those hopes for technology it's very hard to tell. Like, is this just highlighting the harm that we're trying to ameliorate, or is this actually enhancing the harm that we're seeking to ameliorate? And it's extremely difficult to figure out.
Yeah, here's another one I want to cite, just because this relates to so much of what we talk about. There's a whole category under systemic oppression, which in and of itself, is something I think you and I don't see eye to eye on. And the first one was fascinating to me, right? So this was journalism in that category. So Facebook's internal training materials for its moderators state, we allow praise, support, and representation of white separatism as an ideology, e.g. the US should be a white-only nation. At the same time, Facebook notes that our implementation standards prohibit organizations and people dedicated to promoting hatred and violence against people based on their protected characteristics.
Interesting. But then it's fascinating, right? And then we know, having watched Facebook the past number of years, now maybe this is partially because of the government intervention that's been quite clearly, openly demonstrated, that they don't do that. they don't follow that. You know what I mean? And again, what we all started with, right? In terms of hatred, discrimination, even violence, or certainly the allowance of violence or the allowance of death to the unvaccinated, for example, not a protected category. So I don't know if that was racial specific but like as though that was somehow the only relevant identity. So it's fascinating too. And I think this is a huge thing. This is very similar to like the US Constitution or the application of the US Constitution. Like I think US Constitution is awesome, right? The application of it often ran contrary to the words themselves, right? Especially in considering like who a person was, right? So it's similar that like it's fascinating to look at statement pieces and then how they do it. Or the Bible is a great example, right? You're like, I think the Bible is in the infallible word of God. People's application of such, absolutely not the case. Absolutely not infallible. Fallible often to tragic or fatal consequences. So it's fascinating to me that this speaks so much to like intention. We've talked about this too, right? Intention and sort of actual result. And I think, this is a funny thing I've been thinking about recently too, the binary element, which talks about what we're talking about here and loops back to the first thing you said, in terms of like looking at the harm analysis. I am a firm believer in binary thinking. I think it is false, though, to say if you look at something like all social media technology and this harm analysis, you could fall into a binary of, oh my gosh, look at all this harm. This is bad, right? This is what I call just like lazy binary thinking. Instead, you actually have to zoom in to every single interaction and find the binary within each element, right? This is just the list of harms. I think a lot of folks, I don't fall into this as much, but I'm sure I fall into some degree, but a lot of folks fall into this deeply where things have to be all good or all bad. And then that's why people, I think this is, again, to talk about the pandemic, like this is why people couldn't brook any conversation about vaccine harm. They're like, no, they're all good. If you talk about harms, that means it's bad. And you're like, what does that come from? That is like, I honestly don't even know where that, because I love trying to figure out where these sort of theologies arrive from. I don't even know where that comes from. But it's very similar here to technology, that like to examine the harms as we're doing right now is not a dismissal in any way, shape, or form of like the potential. Because I think both you and I, social media is a great example of all these harms, but you and I both like richly see, maybe even believe in the benefits. I'm becoming more and more skeptical, I think, over the past year or so of the benefits of social media, but I can't stop trying. I mean, I literally try my hardest every day.
Yeah.
To the point, so that's, it was just an important caveat I wanted to introduce, especially as the resident binary thinker, that like, none of this is intended to dismiss, and no one should consider it as dismissal. You have to weigh these things. It is always some version of a harm benefit analysis.
Yeah, I agree. And I left that part of my story in 2007. I got so excited about social media, and
oh, me too,
there were
man.
parts of this I had, pieces I had been tracking. I mean, how we were on Friendster or whatever, way back in the day.
Yes.
You owe me the best Friendster testimonial. I hope I kept it somewhere.
That was the best part of Friendster.
Yep. So we're in this weird little pocket of a generation, right, where we saw like the earliest seeds of this, but we didn't really grow up with it. Like to your point, I was running around and all of that as a kid too. So, but I love what you just said, and yes, like I think you and I often come back to our own attempt at a harm benefit analysis. And what I got really excited about in 2007 was the power for everybody to have a voice. And I started saying, well, everybody ought to have a voice, and everybody ought to have a filter. I think we've done so much better at the voices than the filters. Like, I mean, I just heard there's 50 million books on Amazon. There's hundreds of thousands self-published. So it's like anybody can basically, aside from the digital divide, basically anybody can start a channel anywhere, at least here in America. But it's like overwhelming. So I think that's the problem we're having. And I think that's why we try to jump to these binaries and sort of oversimplified answers, because it's just overwhelming and it's getting worse. There's just this fire hose. And I think you're a little more predisposed to to deal with the fire hose in a variety of ways. That's what I sense about you. Just like you can interpret lots of data, and maybe you even like that. But one thing I want to, in that vein, it's interesting. Like I sort of quietly boycott Amazon for the most part. It's weird though, because with the work I do with mutual aid, it's like, oh, we realized an Amazon wish list is a way to give people more dignity, right? So they can actually choose what they what they need and stuff like that. And it's convenient. So it's like I'm always in that sort of conflict, and like and it's just, I live in a big city, so it's easy. I could just walk down the street and get things. I don't really need to order much. However, Alexa is changing my life because my dad, in the last year, his health has really suffered. He's still with us, and mostly cogent, but he's really losing a lot of physical capabilities. And so it got to the point where he really couldn't even use a smartphone anymore. And I don't have any listening devices in my house. Like I have Siri on my phone, so it's like, well, I'm actually always carrying one with me. I know that, but otherwise I just try to minimize it. I was even looking at like smart thermostats, and I'm like, does it have a microphone? Like what the hell? Why does everything? Which is really funny. I feel like I'm regressing actually. Like I used to be so on the edge of technology, and I had to have everything brand new, and now I'm kind of like, but anyway, the Alexa, which on one piece of context that I think is important in the context of capitalism, which pops up in our discussions, is that I've heard, I should validate this, but I heard from somebody that Alexa loses about $10 billion a year, which wouldn't shock me. It's like the amount of research. It's so funny, actually. Remember back in college, I kept trying to get my Mac to like tell me a joke. Like that was the joke. Apple's voice tech has, you know what? I hope we don't get sued. Apple's voice tech has always really sucked, in my opinion. And even Siri, I just feel like she can do sort of three things reliably, and that's it. But you've got now Alexa, which is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. And my dad, whose voice is, his voice is getting sort of weaker and maybe a little more less clear and less linear in a way. Now I was able to, I do a little hacking on the back end, but I got it to the point where he can use his Alexa Echo Dot to call everybody in the family, and we can call him with his voice. So now there's this magical robot, and it blew my mind, because on the one hand I was like, oh, this is a weird validation of Amazon and their trillions of dollars, because that's at least in our current structure, that's the only way we could possibly fund such a project. And then just like, oh my God, like how many generations haven't had something like this? Like they just would get to a point where nobody can communicate with them unless they stop by. So that person probably just ends up being extraordinarily lonely, all the time. So that's something that's hitting me very personally right now, is relating to technology and listening devices, and capitalism. It's just like, so it's a positive. So I like speaking to the positives. And I know it's wildly important. And but of course, what we know about technology, even as you put it in your dad's room, you're like, this is, I think, what we all need to healthily do. You're like, I acknowledge and know all the potential detriments of what I'm doing right now. Like, he's not age range. He's not really like a highly marketed to, so not going to prioritize what they're listening to. But like the ability for Alexa to better understand him makes him able to actually communicate in a way that could theoretically save his flipping life at some point. That's fantastic. The fact that Alexa can understand his deteriorating voice, and then he's like, oh, okay, well, that's fine, as long as you can understand me. It's the same thing that, like, if you move somebody who lives in a two-story house, an older person, to a single-story house, their health can decline rapidly because they no longer have to continually like work to make the effort to do this thing, So then every single thing you do is a cost benefit analysis. I think there's an assumption, I fall into this myself, that if people are doing something, I tend to assume they think it is a good thing, bold, you know what I mean? As opposed to, well, I kind of ran the cost benefit analysis here, and the benefit, there's more benefit than cost. And the distinct benefits are so beneficial that, like, whatever ethical concerns you might have about the corporation itself, the data mining, if it's on a loss, then
may very well, then whatever they accrue in terms of information through listening is worth that much to them, which means, hold on a second, should you be paying me to have an Alexa in my home? Potentially.
Probably.
Yeah. But like, it's just that the benefit has outweighed the cost. And I think, again, speaks to the flexibility of our show in general. That's what we need to constantly, I think, focus on talking about when we are talking to each other in inflammatory ways is, okay, how did you arrive at that? Looking at the cost and the benefit, as opposed to that lazy binary, the zoom out binary is like, why did you do this bad thing? Why did you do this good thing? That's literally not what's happening. You know what I mean? And then then we're just talking about, oh yeah, I didn't see the harms that we both see as the same size or as overwhelming, or I saw the benefits bigger than you saw them. So that's what we're literally talking about, the degrees, meaning the assemblages of tiny little black and white squares to keep it binary. I didn't see it in the same way. So then in some ways we're hopefully through technology, and this is what I thought social media would be good for. We're all essentially having the same or very similar conversations. It's just a matter of, but this is the thing I've noticed, and I don't know if social media created this. I've had enough conversations with people where, and especially for the past couple of years, this is what's put me into, we need to slow down. We need to pause. What's going on here? I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who have done no cost benefit analysis, no harm benefit analysis at all but then they have really adamant positions on things, which is like, that to me is a deadly serum. I think is going to poison our entire society. And that's part of my fear for AI too, because I feel like one of the potential uses, let me just say right now, the biggest harm of AI is going to be its use in pornography, just the same way the internet is dominantly pornography. AI porn is probably, I think, maybe the maximal harm. But secondly, I think people will have a tendency to outsource all of this processing stuff that they're already outsourcing to media or to the state or to stuff I heard or to what my tribe says. They're going to start outsourcing that to AI. And I think that's what so much of the concern has been so far. It's like, yes, the fulfillment of the Terminator prophecy is certainly prevalent. But even more so, the headlines I've been seeing has been about the where people can call it like woke GBT or whatever, that like there's clear bias. And there's many demonstrated examples. Go ahead and DuckDuckGo it or Google it or Bing it, whatever you do. Bing has AI incorporated. So
that's their comeback to take over search.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I need to run, and
yep.
I feel like this is maybe one of our to be continued episodes.
Yeah.
Certainly something we both agree with, and I don't know how we do this broadly, but like that we should have all these feedback loops with the harm benefit analysis, right?
Yes.
We should constantly be like, actually looking. But did you want to finish that thought about the Terminator prophecy?
But yeah, so not only the Terminator prophecy, but that people, I think, will very quickly be looking to AI to do their critical thinking for them.
Yeah.
Which, hey, might be better than none. But since it is not right now, the technology is what we don't have to fear yet. It's who is programming the technology essentially is controlling the world. No,
I have a good friend of mine is like, that's her whole passion and body work is just, she's just like, this is a critical moment because all the bias we program in right now is basically going to be like the foundation of everything that's built on top of the AI, for sure.
Yeah, it's a bedrock.
I love you.
I love you.
Awesome. Good to see you.
I hope you're a real person and not a deep fake, because this was a lovely conversation.
But wouldn't that justify the deep fake if we could have a lovely conversation? Anyway, we'll talk about that next time.
In a way it would. All right.
Bye.